In this video, I'm going to be making 4 different fantasy LEGO armies, and we're also going to be building each one of them their very own base. We've got a ton to do in this video, and a lot of lore to go over, so let's just get right into it, first with the Lunar Elves. Here is the leader of the coven. She's a witch that you may recognize from a few videos ago. I really loved how this character looked, so I decided to make a whole faction for her. Speaking of, the other members are all made from different parts from this CMF that came out a couple of years ago. It is a really cool CMF figure that I never really made any armies with, so this was a good excuse to use it. I've spiced each of them up with different armor pieces and some different magical spells that I'll explain here in a second. The idea behind these elves is that they are a coven of witches and wizards that worship the moon. They believe that their faith in it is what has granted them their magical abilities, and if they were to halt in their devotion to the moon, they would lose all their powers. So now that you know a little bit more about these guys, let's actually build them a base. To start, I've laid down a rough looking stone floor. To this simple stone base plate, we can add in the left side wall. On here, I've included a brick built shelf with some random trinkets on it. We can beef it up even more by adding this arch piece that just makes the shelf look a little bit more realistic. For the main backside wall, I'm gonna throw down this fireplace. I always forget to add fireplaces to my medieval buildings, so going forward, I hope to include more of them in my mocks. Next up, we can add in the main wall that I've done in the same white and brown Tudor style as the other one. But I have included some nice big windows here on either side of the fireplace, and I think it just frames the interior space quite nicely. Now that the wall is placed, we can add in the chimney for the fireplace. Around the back, I've placed this little assembly here with some snot bricks so that we can simply attach the chimney to it. And finally, all we have to do to finish this vignette is add in a large war table and some crates of loot. This turned out to be such a fun interior build, and once I'm done with my massive full Black Falcon castle that I'm working on, I might revisit these guys and also make a full castle for them. But for now, let's move on to our next army, the Draconic Elves. For these guys, I've taken a bunch of black robes from different themes and I've combined them together. Most of them come from Star Wars minifigs, but I think they're going to work great for this faction. Some of them have green capes while others have black and red ones. But again, I wanted that predominant color scheme to just be black. For the head and hair on these guys, I went mostly with hair from Lord of the Rings, but I did include this character that uses the new elf hairpiece from the D&D packs. It's just too perfect not to use here. As for accessories, this lady has an alchemy book, while this guy has a potion. To explain the reason why they have this stuff, you need to know a little bit more about this faction. The Draconic Elves, in stark contrast to the Lunar Witches, have bent the natural world into their own making through the rigorous study of alchemy. Where the Lunar Witches place their faith in the moon, the Draconic Elves have faith only in themselves. The Coven views them as arrogant and misguided, but even with all that faith in the moon, the only elves to birth dragons did so alone. So for the build for these guys, I think it'd be cool to make them an alchemy lab and a dragon keeping area, kind of like a cell block for the dragons. To start, we're going to take this base plate that I've made with some simple wooden planks and a stone area in the back where the dragon cells are going to go. The main bulk of this build is the dragon cell block that I've included with some barred windows near the bottom and a main entrance so that the elves can go inside and feed the dragons and whatnot. Above this cell, we've got a little walkway with a railing. Once all of this is placed onto the base plate, we can simply add this Tudor white and brown wall to it. I personally love how this looks up here, and it kind of gives you the impression that this is the interior of a much larger building of some kind. Now we can add in a lectern, a fire with a cauldron, and of course the baby dragons inside of their cell. I'm pretty happy with how this scene turned out, and I think this would actually be a pretty easy build to modify into a full building with an exterior in the future. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see, because I love the lore behind these guys, and it'd be a ton of fun to make a larger mock for them in the future. Next up, we'll be taking a look at my favorite custom faction that I think I've ever made before. These are the Elves of the Morning. For the leader of this young faction, we have this guy, who again I think you might recognize from a recent video. I've changed him up a little bit after getting a tip from a viewer in the comments. I took this sword from Rivendell and I've simply stuffed it into his satchel so that it rests on his back. I absolutely love how this technique looks, and I could not be happier with the end result. So shout out to Burning Bricks for this brilliant idea. Anyways, next we've got a bunch of his savage soldiers that all carry a variety of different weapons and accessories. This guy's got an axe from a previous video, but I've also given him a phoenix companion to match the kind of fiery lore behind these guys. Speaking of, this woman from that same older video has some new fire magic, and so does this guy that's carrying a flaming sword. And the last new guy is this one, who is the leader's apprentice. So now that you've seen the figs, here is the backstory for them. These savage elves of the morning are the youngest race of the world and have not yet had to work for their magic like the other elves, as their power comes as easy to them as the sun does rise in the morning. With this great privilege, the young elves spend little time pondering their gift and instead have taken to the desert to loot and conquer all the other races around them. They've become rich, but with no equals in the desert, they intend to cut their teeth on the more organized and powerful realms of men to the west. As the herd of the sun marches west, the conquered sigh a breath of relief before stepping out of their caves into the wasteland they used to rule. Now, before we take a look at those conquered creatures, we must first make a mock for the Sun Elves. Now, I could make them a base of some kind, but I think because of their lore, I think it'd make more sense for them to be raiding someone else's castle. So, why not make a Black Falcon throne room for them to sack? To begin, we're going to take a simple base plate with a raised platform on the right side for the throne to go on. To this, we'll add 3 walls and a doorway with a stained glass window in the middle of the room. We'll decorate the walls a little bit with a couple of hanging candles and a Black Falcon banner as well. Finally, all we have to do to finish this little scene is add in some treasure and a throne for the Falcon Prince to sit on. With all the figs in here, I think it turned out looking pretty good, but I still would love to make some more mocks for these elves in the future because they will absolutely be joining the larger full lore of my LEGO Castle world sometime soon. If you've got any ideas for mocks for these guys, I would love to hear them. I definitely want to do some siege weapons for them, like a battering ram and a siege tower at some point, but I don't know right now. Let me know. Anyways, for our final kingdom, we will be taking a look at the Brotherhood of the Desert. These guys have been made out of a bunch of different alien heads from mostly Star Wars. I wanted them to all have a orangey tan skin color, and thankfully Star Wars has a ton of great heads for that. I've combined them with a mix of torsos and legs from both the Black Falcons and the older Lion Knights. I love how their orange heads match with the blue clothes, and I think it makes for a super cool looking mercenary or rebel group. Now that you've seen the figs, let's talk about their lore. The Brotherhood of the Desert came out of necessity over wanting. The small tribes living in the desert were sick of the savage morning elves and have banded together in defiance. Looking past all of their petty squabbles towards their new and more powerful foe, they've come out of hiding and now plan to kick the Sun Elves out of the desert for good. So for their build, I want to make them a classic feeling tavern / secret hideout for the Brotherhood. Like they've been holed up inside of an abandoned cavern and have turned it into a makeshift base of operations for their war against the elves. I think it's a really fun idea, so let's get into it. So we'll make another base plate with a raised wooden section on one side that will have a fireplace and a more lounge-like area from the tavern. You'll notice that I've also taken the bear pelt design from the medieval blacksmith, and I've slightly modified it so that it fits into this mock. I love the look of a bear pelt in front of a fireplace, and I think this tavern rebel base idea just goes so well with it. To this, we can now start to add in the walls. I'll place 2 stone walls on either side of the raised section. One's going to have a sword on the wall, and the other has a lute hung up underneath a decorative arch. Now I can add in the Tudor wall that I've placed on some slopes to give it a little bit more depth. And to finish off this upper section of the build, we can add in this fireplace I made. Down on the base floor, we can add in another stone wall that I've placed the bounty board on. Again, kind of continuing with the tavern-esque design that I'm going for. I think it fits in perfectly. And finally, our last wall is going to be another Tudor wooden plaster wall. Now we can simply add in some other details like a spear rack, a chair, and some barrel tables for the rebels to stand around. I am so pleased with how this base ended up looking, and I think I might also be adding these guys to my LEGO Castle world because they just feel so right, if that makes any sense. And obviously, they kind of go hand in hand with the Sun Elves, so I gotta include both of them. Anyways, please let me know which faction and build was your favorite, and if you have any ideas for them in the future, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe? I've got a ton more mock videos coming really soon. And as always, thank you so much for watching.